So, hello everybody. I'm talking about YAML, and just a few sentences about me. I'm doing Perl since 1998 and YAML since 2017. And I'm working at SUSE Software Solutions since last year. And my job title can probably also be YAML consultant. And I'm maintaining several, or co-maintaining several YAML projects. And the topics are what is YAML and why is it actually so complicated? And I show you some features and plugins for YAML PP. So what is YAML? Yet another? No. YAML a markup language. And it was invented 2001 by Oren Ben-Kiki, Clark Evans, and Ingi.net. And hi Ingi, I think he's in the audience right now. And previous of my talk, I heard a question, should I use JSON or YAML? And my answer is yes, you should use JSON or YAML. But maybe you actually meant to say, should I use either JSON or YAML? And it really depends. So which applications are actually using YAML? Ansible, SaltStack, Travis CI, Circle CI, and so on, Kubernetes, Docker Compose, OpenQA, and a lot more. And for all these, it would probably be not so good to use JSON. And with the physical audience, I would actually ask who loves YAML and who is angry at YAML. So why are people angry at YAML? So I have some ideas, but maybe you can use the feedback form after the talk, maybe to tell me why you are angry at YAML. So I think the syntax can be quite hard to understand sometimes, and there are a lot of differences in YAML implementations in Perl and in other languages. Just some short examples. This is a mapping and a sequence, and you can also write the sequence like that because the hyphen counts as indentation. Nested mappings. And you also have this flow style syntax. It's more compact. And you have anchors and aliases. So the address is an anchor for this mapping. And you can reuse it here. And if you load it into Perl, that's a reference pointing to the same data structure. And the YAML input can also have more than one document. So you get actually a list. And yeah, I often see questions on IRC or Stack Overflow, and I would really like to point people to a website saying, here's a really good tutorial, but some have tiny mistakes, are missing stuff, and were actually written for YAML 1.1. So I started to write one 2 weeks ago. It's still work in progress, so there's a little tutorial, and here's all about quoting and an overview over some libraries. So there are actually some new libraries out there that support the 1.2 syntax. So all tests are passing. So libf-YAML, and there's yaml.net. And in JavaScript, we have the new YAML library. So check out this tutorial if you want to learn some YAML. And the source of the tutorial is, of course, written in YAML. And the HTML is, of course, generated with Perl. So there are different YAML versions. It started with 1.0, and YAML PM was written for that. Most implementations out there are still for 1.1. and many did not really implement it correctly. So the specification is huge and a bit hard to understand. It has examples, but they do not cover all cases. And there was no test suite until 2016 when Ingi started one. And this is now, I think, a huge success so far. So more and more libraries are using it. And there are also differences in the schema. So as you might know, YAML strings don't need to be quoted unless, of course, they start with a dash or have a colon space, or they would be loaded as special values. So I can actually see the chat. So here's a question. How many values are loaded as booleans in YAML 1.1? Anyone wants to make a guess how many that are? Nobody? Oh, far from it. So we have true, false, y, and yes, and no, on, and off. So that's 22. And actually, the country code for Norway is loaded as a Boolean, so you have to quote it. This was actually improved in YAML 1.2, but still a lot of libraries actually use 1.1. So Python was one of the first implementations for 1.1, and libyaml was ported from that, I think. And many other implementations actually used PyYAML and imported from them, or are using libyaml binding. And it left out some syntax elements like empty keys. And also PyYAML doesn't recognize the Y and the N, also uppercase. The implementations in Perl. So we have 5 main modules, and none of them actually support the complete syntax. I'm working on it, but the cases that are left are not so relevant for real world. And they all behave differently regarding the schema. And currently only YAML-PP supports the correct schema for both versions. And I made a list of the schemas. So here is the 1.2 core schema. It only has those Boolean values. And here you can see YAML 1.1. And here are examples. So this is how it should resolve. Here's the input YAML, and here is the result. And this is how YAML-PM, YAML-Seque, and YAML-XS behave. There's a big chaos. So this, of course, it's working if you just use one module and read and write the YAML with that module. It works fine. But the usage is really growing, and it becomes more and more necessary to process YAML files with different libraries. And even some configuration files are generated with the library instead of being handwritten. And if they all behave differently, this is going to be a real mess. So I hope we can fix that. And already 9 different projects are using the yaml-test-suite. And I'm also preparing a test suite for the schema, for the Boolean and number resolving. And yeah, so now YAML-PP. It's implemented modular and makes custom processing possible, and I'll show you some examples later. And its goal is really to to be as compatible as possible with other libraries so that you can switch on and off features. So YAML-PM implements the whole process in Perl. It parses Perl and directly creates a data structure, and there are not so many possibilities to customize that. I think you can inherit from a class, but I never tried that actually. yaml-XS is using the C code from libyaml and directly creates a data structure in XS. So you can only set some options, but other than that, you have no influence. And I hope you can see that. I have to make the window a little bit bigger. So YAML PP implementation. On the left side, we have the syntax, and on the right side, we have the schema, which is about the booleans and numbers. And when loading, we have the YAML stream, which is parsed into tokens and generating an event list. And from that, it creates a data structure, and the constructor is customizable. And for dumping, it's pretty much the same. You have the data structure, it's creating a list of events and the output. Of course, this is quite slow actually, because it's so customizable. But the good thing is you can actually use libyaml behind. So if you replace the parser and the emitter with libyaml, you can get a little bit faster than that. And you still benefit from the customization of the constructor. So some benchmarks, YAML PP is the slowest YAML module in Perl. YAML PM is faster. And with YAML PP libyaml, yeah, you can save some time. The funny thing is YAML Tiny is even faster because it's really only a subset and it doesn't know any types except the tilde for undefined. The YAML Tiny, it's a problem if you use it and then you want to use another library because it accepts YAML that is not valid, so you will run into problems actually. And of course, YAML Seque and yaml-XS are the fastest. So some options, you can set the indentation width. Don't use 5, please, that's just an example. You can set the header and the footer and the version directive. And so here's an option. What's problematic about this if you are loading untrusted YAML? So this is setting an anchor on this array, and inside this you are referring to itself. And that can actually cause a memory leak. And you can disable that, cyclic refs fatal. You can also just ignore them and load undef. And there's no weaken option yet because it's complicated. And also the next option. So here's a YAML that is using a Boolean. And if you load that with YAML PM and dump it with JSON, you get the string true. If you load that with YAML Seque and dump it with JSON, you get 1. So in YAML PP, you can choose between different Boolean options, just one or the empty string or JSON PP or Boolean, so it will round trip. That's also possible in YAML-XS. Now, sometimes you might want to load a YAML and dump it again, and the order should stay the same, the order of hash keys, but by default they are sorted. But there's an option for that. And it's implemented with a tied hash. So you use this constant and say preserve order, and then it will preserve the order. There's another option. So here is a list of strings, plain scalar, single quoted, which is not anymore single quoted when dumping. So all the formatting goes away. And there's also an option, preserve scalar style. And this should be used only for loading and dumping because it loads the string into an object. And the overloading is very simple so far. And you can try that out with this utility script. So what about Perl types and objects? So they are not enabled by default, but you can enable it with the schema option. So the plus stands for the default schema, and then you can add the Perl schema, and then you have all the references, regexes, and objects. But maybe sometimes you only want to load certain classes and ignore others. And for that, you have another option. So you instantiate the schema object and give it a list of classes and pass this object to the schema option. So yeah, what does this mean in YAML merge keys? No Perl YAML module does implement this yet, except YAML PP. So I mentioned aliases and anchors before, but this is something on top. So you have a default hash. And here you can reuse this, but you can override values and also add values. So this would be the result, and you can find it everywhere. So people are using this a lot, and it's very handy. It's one of the YAML 1.1 types, and some processes actually implement them and some don't. And in YAML PP, they are optional, so if you need them, you can enable them with the schema option. So including other YAML files, maybe you had the wish for doing something like this. So you have a billing and a shipping address, and you actually have those in other files, and that's a custom tag. And here's the billing address, and this content will actually be loaded in this position. That's not a standard YAML tag, it's just the custom tag. You can implement any tag in a YAML library that supports that. And it works like this. You instantiate a schema include object and pass that to the schema option. And you still need this line. And I hope I can actually make that optional. But yeah, it's working, and we're actually using this already at SUSE. So far, no complaints. The include does allow nested includes, but not cyclic. And it is searching relative to the currently processed YAML file. Absolute paths are not allowed, but you can enable it. So if you want to load etc password, you can actually do that, and it's actually valid YAML. So you can say allow absolute. And you can also pass it a list of paths where to search from instead of searching relative to the current YAML file. You can also use both things together. So we have a merge key and an include. And yeah. And now you can also add your own construct. Sure, I think I have to hurry up a bit. So maybe you see from the regex, this is about Roman numbers. And you just pass a match regex, and it gets the value and returns the integer for that. I could have used some a module from Daniel Conway, but to keep it simple, I just used this. And here you have a 7 and another 7. Both will be loaded as integers. The API is not stable, but yeah. So AWS CloudFormation is also using functions like that. So in the JSON, you have to do this, but in the YAML, you can use these custom tags. And there's a module that actually uses YAML-PP for that. And there are also options to support both versions. Yeah, and I didn't have time to port this to Raku. I really would like to do this at some point, but didn't have time yet. And that's it. So are there any questions? Yeah. So will the Raku version be YAML RR? That's a nice idea. But maybe YAML-PP actually stands for YAML++. So other questions? Okay, then thank you very much. The slides are linked from the schedule. And thank you. Bye-bye.